Let me just see here. Oh, wow, my notes. I can't see my notes. That's going to be an interesting flight. Oh, there it is. Hello, everybody. My name is Rod Escaola, and I'm your condominium lawyer with Gowling WLG. This is the script for October, so we're going to have to change that again. Kids, don't try this at home. This is the magic of television. There it is. Here I am again. Welcome to the January edition of our monthly condo webinar. Believe it or not, we're tackling season number 2. And so that's pretty exciting. Thanks so much, everybody, for taking the time to join us on now on a monthly basis, usually the first Wednesday of the month. But tonight, this time around, because it was January, we thought we'd get a bit lazy. Now, just in case you thought we'd run out of material to cover, sadly, yesterday, the province has, for the second time in 10 months, declared a state of emergency with further restrictions and sweeping powers to the province to enforce them. And this was required, obviously, because of the COVID numbers are simply not going in the right direction. They've doubled over the last 2 weeks. And to save our healthcare system, which is on the brinks of breaking down, I'm relaying words here from yesterday's press conference. In light of all of that, the province has had to do what it had to do. And, they told us we'd fall off our chair, and falling off our chair, we did. They've announced a second state of emergency. And so we're going to be talking about that. That's going to be the first half of today's webinar. And the second half will be devoted to a loaded question. Get ready for this one. Can condominium request proof of vaccination? And so that's really, that was going to be the main topic, but Doug Ford had different plans for us. Now, as usual, what we've done, we've called upon our trusted experts to join us tonight. You'll recognize the usual crew. They are returning fresh from their holidays that they spent at home, which is no different than any other day where they work from home. And so here it is. Now, I was thinking of what kind of a theme could we have today to introduce our team, and I was debating, should I go with New Year's resolution, and I wasn't too sure what to do. And then Doug Ford went forward and brought us back to the future. So I thought that that could be the theme tonight. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce them, referring to various characters from that movie. Those movies, there were quite a few movies. Okay, so who do we got? From Crossbridge, speaking on behalf of ACMO, she is Marty McFly's girlfriend, Jennifer Parker. We have Catherine Gow. Hello, Catherine.
Great to be here. Thanks a lot for having me, Rod.
And we have from Lash Condo Law, speaking on behalf of CAI Canada. In a minute, I'll ask you what's your New Year's resolution, but we have Marty McFly's mother, Lorraine Baines McFly, aka Denise Lash. Hi, Denise.
Oh, hi, I love it. Great to be here.
Thanks for being here. And now we have, who is she? From DES Services, she is Doc Brown's wife. And her name, I guess, is, oh gee, I forgot to take her name down, but there's the picture. And this brings me to José Deslongchamps. José, trivia for you. What's the name of Doc Brown's wife?
I have
Mrs.
no
Brown.
idea.
Mrs. Brown.
Mrs. Brown.
Probably. Okay, very good. From the National Life Safety Group, we have Biff Tannen, and that is our very own Jason Reed. Hi, Jason.
Somebody had to be Biff, and I was counting my cards. I knew it was me.
Yeah.
There is a striking resemblance.
Now, I suspect that our next guest from Apollo Property Management is sort of seeing what's coming down the pike for him. Yeah, we have Dr. Brown.
There we go.
Sean, how's it going?
I don't
Sean
have the hair
Morgan?
for it. Hey, I tell you, Rod, if you wanted us to be fresh and rested for this, it should have been last week that you held this seminar. But
That's right.
no, happy to be here. It's good to be back.
Wonderful. And our condo twins are reunited again. They're together this evening. We have here your condo lawyer from Gowling WLG, Marty McFly himself, Graham McPherson.
Excellent. I got Marty.
You jerk.
Yay.
Also, bringing you the
Thank God you're
hard-hitting
not in the
news.
same room.
This is why the people show up. I can confirm that Doc Brown's wife's name is, well, her maiden name was Clara Clayton.
That's right.
There you go.
That's exactly it. But we have a second twin, and the second twin is Seamus McFly. Oh, let me go back to this. There it is. So we got our twins.
Tremendous
Nicely
hat.
done. Yeah.
Okay, very good. So you know the drill, folks. If you have questions, please send them in the chat line. I mean, there's a lot of people chatting already. That's wonderful. Just keep it clean and friendly, and we'll see if we can pick up some questions from the attendees. Housekeeping matters. I know you come here for the disclaimer. That's what you come here for. So usual disclaimer tonight, we're going to be talking about legislation. We're usually always actually referring to Ontario legislation. So for those of you listening from elsewhere, you may have to do some adaptations to your own jurisdiction. The information we're providing tonight is as accurate as we can and is as of today. Actually, in 5 minutes, it may be out of date. And so today's broadcast is on the 13th of January. So that's the date of accuracy, I guess. Most importantly, whatever information we provide today is general in nature. We do our very best to provide you real sort of practical advice and guidance and information. But at the end of the day, there's nothing like retaining an expert to go and give you advice for your very specific situation. So it's not legal advice you get tonight, it's maybe legal entertainment. That's what you get tonight. And finally, for whatever reason, I have to say that this session is being recorded, and in a couple of weeks, so whenever we get to it, we will post it on Condo Advisor. You'll be able to get to it. Okay, what do we got? Let me change slides. This is the agenda tonight. And we're going to start without further ado about yesterday's declaration of emergency. So just to put in context, as you all know, last December 21st, the province announced a province-wide shutdown. It was to start on December 26th, conveniently right after Boxing Day. And it was to last 28 days in Southern Ontario and 14 days in Northern Ontario. They're just made a bit more solid in Northern Ontario, I guess. And so, but unfortunately, I mean, COVID numbers didn't go the way they were supposed to go. And a couple of new COVID variants have emerged, Japan, South Africa, England. And so last Thursday, Doug Ford announced that the situation was pretty extreme and that he had some very bad news for us, but we'd have to wait the whole weekend and Monday before he would break the news to us. And he said we'd fall off our chair, and we did, in fact, yesterday fall off our chair. There was the second sort of declaration of emergency. So Graham, I'm turning to you now. Walk us through yesterday's declaration.
Yeah, so thanks very much. Once I managed to pick myself up and get myself back in my chair, we all took a look at what the declaration of an emergency would mean. And at this point, everyone in Ontario is an expert on this. We've been through this song and dance before. But basically what's come now is a couple of things are still the same as they were as of Boxing Day, like you said, Rod. And you can see on this slide, actually, that a couple of the items that haven't changed, other than the fact that maybe some have become slightly more restricted, and I think we can expect them to be in place for a longer time. But these items that haven't really changed are you still need to wear masks inside indoor common areas. Indoor organized public events and social gatherings are still a no-go. Outdoor organized public events and social gatherings have been brought down from 10 people to 5, and we're going to expand on that a little bit in just a minute. And also gyms, pools, and other rec amenities unfortunately have to remain closed. And again, you know, it looks like this is going to be the status quo for a while, at least until it gets reevaluated in February.
Okay, so that's what's the same. You're going to cover what's new, I guess, next.
I am, yeah, and just like that, here we have it. So there have been a couple of things that have changed that have further restricted a lot of what's in place. But I think for a lot of people, depending on what you're doing, you may not feel these changes all that much in your day-to-day life. The biggest, most significant one that I think caught a lot of people's attention was a stay-at-home order. And we were promised more details on that would come, clarifying it, because some people were confused, myself included, about how, you know, there could be a gathering limit of 5 and a stay-at-home order at the same time. I think the clarification that came, as reported by the media today, was that that gathering of 5 limit outside is intended so that anyone who lives alone is able to at least have some sort of social interaction. But for the most part, when in doubt, stay at home. Another update, which is pretty much just a codification of what everyone was working with before, is that if you are an employee and you can work from home, you should. And as employers, if you can let your employees work from home, they have to.
And we're going to cover that a bit later, actually.
Yeah. masks, not Max, sorry about that, are now also being recommended outdoors when social distancing is impossible, aka when you can't be more than 2 meters apart from a crowd or somebody else with you in the crowd. And then here's a big one, was that non-essential construction work has been restricted again. And I expect we're going to get a lot of questions about that. What constitutes non-essential construction work? And Rod, we can get into that now or later if you want.
A bit later, just finish with maybe setting the table.
Yeah, okay. And then I think the last piece of cutlery I have to put out at the table here is that the non-essential retail stores, including your big box stores, your hardware stores, liquor stores, they have to restrict their hours between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m., even if they're doing curbside pickup. But those restrictions don't apply to essential stores like grocery stores, pharmacies, gas stations, or restaurants doing takeout and delivery.
Okay, and I guess one sort of maybe disclaimer that we have to put forth is that all the information you have in front of you is really based mainly on the press release and on the information circulated in the media. As of very recently, I've checked again to see if any regulations had been issued or if an order in council had been issued, and I haven't seen that yet. I've seen just the declaration of emergency that was issued yesterday. But I haven't seen sort of like the meat and bones around that. Now, having said that, we do have a link on your slide, Graham, and that link will bring you to some kind of a summary issued by the province and updated yesterday. And so, and I'll try to put that maybe on. Actually, it's on our latest blog post. There's a link there, and so you'll be able to sort of see a lot more details. But that's really for public and media consumption. It doesn't have what gets us lawyers excited. So anything else before I turn to the panel, Graham?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's unfortunate that we don't have the real meat and potatoes regulation to work with yet. I'm sure that'll come out right when we press end on this webinar, but I guess that's why the people need to stay tuned. In any event, we can talk about the construction, at least the residential construction that seems to be allowed right now. We can do that now or later. Rod, I am in your hands.
Sure. So what can you tell us about the non-essential construction?
So the construction that's been deemed to be allowed, at least as far as construction for condominium, both units and full condominium buildings is concerned, is on the full condominium building level, we've been informed that below grade multi-unit residential construction projects like apartments and condominium, that can continue. Similarly, residential construction projects, and in my view, based on what I just said, the part where it specified that residential construction projects for multi-unit places like condominiums, in my view, the next part I'm going to read probably arguably does refer to unit renovations, but residential construction projects where one of three things is in place. Footing permit has been granted for a single family, semi-detached or townhome. A project that is a condominium or a mixed use or other residential building, or projects involving residential renovations for properties where the renovations began prior to January 12th.
Okay, I think that's the
moneymaker.
Right, the most important one. And we may find also other clues under maintenance and repairs, which are also deemed to be essential. So the wording itself is this: maintenance, repair, and property management services. That's all of you managers here that manage and maintain the safety, security, sanitation, and operations of a property. So if the repair that's being done deals with exactly that, maintaining the safety, security, sanitation, and operations of a property or building, that is essential. And so where do we go from there? Denise, what's sort of the recommendation right now that we're giving condo corps?
Well, I'm glad that Graham mentioned that, because that's exactly what I was going to mention about renovations that started before January 12th. So I got these questions yesterday. I didn't know what the answer was. Clients came to us about, they're in the midst of their lobby renovation or the pool renovations. Should we proceed or stop the work? Based on what we have here, and the work had commenced before January 12th, you can proceed. But of course, you can be more restrictive depending on whether there's a vulnerable population and there's issues with respect to abiding by the health protocol, too many workers coming in and out. So you can be more restrictive, but if you're satisfied that you can follow all the proper protocols, then you can continue with the renovations. And that's my position.
Okay, very good. Let's see what managers, how managers have tackled that. I think I'm going to start with you, Jose, on the Ottawa front. What's sort of the take from the trenches? And then I'll turn to Catherine for the Toronto sort of flavor.
It's exactly what Denise said, where a major project is currently underway, especially if it's away from residents. It's a common area where no one's going to have access, provided that the contractors and consultants can abide by our guidelines for distancing and masks and screening. The projects will proceed. No new projects will be started. Some projects that were planned are going to be delayed, obviously, because it's going to interfere with the start of these things. Where it concerns in-unit renovations at the moment, fortunately, we didn't have any major projects in units that we're aware of or where owners have requested permission to proceed. Again, I assume that it'll be something like it was in the spring, where if you're talking about a renovation in unit that is required to install a toilet or to get water running or to reinstate water, that kind of stuff, I have no problem with that. It deals with sanitation and health and hygiene. But now is not the time to undertake a full repainting of your unit or changing the flooring or installing chair rails. Everybody wants that all of a sudden, chair rails. Not essential. This can wait. It's going to have to wait.
Right, and I think that's very much in line with certainly with the recommendations we're making now with respect to in-suite renovations. If it's not essential, if it's not required, if it's not urgent, it's probably best to delay it. And that is fully in line with what's the aim of the game right now. The aim of the game, I mean, we've been told to stay home, we stayed home, and now we're being told to stay home harder. Stay home a bit harder than, like, you can't do that. So if the numbers are not going in the right direction, and if every other, like, we need to change how we're doing things. And so that's the approach we've taken so far and others have taken so far when dealing with in-suite renovations. If it's not urgent or required or essential, it's probably best to postpone
Rod,
it.
not if the work is started. If the work is started, our recommendation is to continue the work.
Right. Well, and I hear you on that front. And I guess my question will be this. It depends what has been started. To me, if you finish what you've started because it's required to be finished, but if you started renovating your unit and what was next was painting the walls, I think that would have to wait. But again, I mean, it's every case will be different. Every case will turn on the very specific, I guess. That's sort of how I see it. Let me turn to Catherine in Toronto. What's the approach?
I tend to agree with you, Rod. And of course, Toronto has the highest caseload, as does, Peel and York and the surrounding regions. I am very sympathetic to folks who've been trying to complete their renovations now for some time. But clearly the indication is very much like early on in the pandemic. Don't look for loopholes. Look instead for how you can safely terminate or end or temporarily kind of put a stop point on your current construction project. Again, we are thinking about all of the residents and their children being at home. So the noise, the smells, all of that is going to be extra irritating as well. And as much as we're looking for a neat project like painting or adding chair rails, as Jose had said, now really isn't the time.
Okay, so that's for Reno. And as you can see, there's a bit of a lot of gray, 50 shades of gray on that question. With respect to gyms, I think, Graham, your position or your interpretation is pretty clear. It's any sort of recreational or fitness facilities, whether it is indoor or outdoor, has to be closed. There's some exceptions, for instance, for professional sports. There's also exceptions if it's in the context of an institution providing childcare or assistance for people with mental health issues. And
I mean, there are certain outdoor facilities that still seem to be allowed.
You have them in front of you. Can you give us examples?
Well, I mean things like a horse riding facility, I think is probably still allowed. But the point of the list is that I don't know how fancy your condominium is, but unless you've got something like that, odds are your facilities are unfortunately going to have to be closed.
Right. So I have the list here: baseball diamonds, batting cages, soccer, football fields, tennis platforms, basketball court, BMX parks, skate parks, frisbee golf locations, cycling track, horse riding, shooting ranges. It's funny how shooting ranges always ends up in an exception. I didn't expect that, but it is what it is. Ice rink, snowmobile, and dog sledding. That's the kind of exceptions we see outdoor. And even this morning, somebody reached out to us and said, "Well, listen, can we set up some boxes for people to step up and down?" And I'm thinking, well, that's going to lead very well into the next discussion about slip and falls and liability. But folks, just close them down, let people exercise as they may or as they can by taking walks on their own. Or I realize this is not good news, but we have to do everything we can to sort of follow the direction and the spirit of these new restrictions. How about another question that came up? Not sure who's going to tackle this one. Open houses and real estate showings. Sean, do you want to give us the Ottawa take on this, and maybe I can turn to Denise after that. Do we still have Sean on the line?
I think he's muted.
Yes.
Who
First
said
one of
that?
the year.
Rod's been trying to do that for years. We always look to, in general, we look to the real estate board to establish what the guidelines are. They've been pretty proactive in setting out limitations or restrictions on open houses. And of course, as Denise mentioned earlier, the corporation can be more restrictive within reason. But in general, we've moved to the appointment setting for realtor appointments. And that's since the Boxing Day closures.
Okay.
Yeah.
Denise, anything to
Yeah,
add?
Rod, I think that open houses are prohibited,
Right.
as far as I know. So it has to be individual appointments.
Exactly. No, absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll still continue with what we were doing at around Boxing Day, Sean. That's exactly it. Now, a question that comes up, and this is for you, Jason, questions about in-suite fire inspections. And I know we were sort of able to skip some of them maybe last spring, and now some people are wondering whether the clock is running out, but more so than what's the strict interpretation of these exceptions, the question will be, how do you balance a clear need to do these kinds of inspections or versus what we're all trying to accomplish here is minimize access and contact between people. So Jason, what can you tell us about that?
Well, we do have a bit of room. So let me just let me clarify one thing. So for essential services such as daily, weekly, monthly, semi-annual, and annual, and 2-year and 5-year fire code requirements, they're all required. There's not a province or territory in the country that has gone out and said that you are alleviated from any type of code compliance. But as we did back in March, there was a general consensus that the in-suite devices would be likely skipped during that annual inspection for 2020. There is a provision in the CAN ULC S536, which is the standard for testing these devices that are found in suites. There is a clause in here that allows those devices to not be tested because they are inaccessible for a period of 2 years. What that means is those devices must be tested once every 2 years. So we're at the 9-month mark, or sorry, we're at the 11th mark, 12-month mark now, or 11th month. So we do have some time, but this will definitely be something to watch when we approach September.
Okay, very good. Graham and Catherine and David, I hope you're monitoring the chat here because I don't have enough screens to be able to do that. So I'm counting on you to keep the crowd under control here.
There's actually a question in the Q&A that it's a pretty easy one to quickly address, but I thought it worth addressing. One of the questions was, do condo business meetings, for the benefit of the whole building, do they count as a social gathering? And I think the question there is ultimately, does the gathering limit apply to that? And it does, because that gathering limit, yes, it applies to social gatherings, but also to organized public events.
Right. So I didn't see the question, but if the question is what, as it applies to AGMs or board meetings, is that it, or?
That's what it doesn't. The question just says, do the condo related business meetings fall under the category of the?
Right, meetings. So I missed that. Right, no, for sure. So it's not, even though it's not a social event, it's a public gathering. It's an organized public gathering. Yeah, for sure. Okay, enforcement. Denise, I think I had you on that, and that's a
Yeah,
tough question. Go
it's
ahead.
a tough question because, I would love it if the province set out these, the provincial officers, whether they're police or bylaw enforcement, to enforce residents that don't comply in the corporation. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know if you have. What we're told is that they're going to be more active now, and there will be penalties and prosecution for those that don't comply. And so how it will affect condominium corporations, we don't know. We're telling our boards, you really, and management, that you really have to determine whether something becomes a danger to other residents, and if so, that you have to take steps yourself. And whether that means going to court. What we had the other day was somebody who wasn't wearing a mask, and the manager's question to me was, what do we do? Can we deactivate the fobs? And I said, well, have you asked the person to wear the mask? Have you sent out notice to the owners to tell them that what could happen if you don't wear the mask? So, before you take those steps, you really need to do that. But there are other ways to carry out the enforcement, and one was deactivating the fobs. So I don't know, we'll have to see what happens with the province.
Right. Well, certainly we'll have to see. And I think though, when you have, I think it's an additional tool that we may have available to us if in fact there's an egregious sort of repeated breach. The same way we would tell our clients sometimes, well, if this is taking place, call the cops. I mean, if somebody is, sending their dog at you, or throwing flower pots or chairs over the balcony railing, or if this and that and the other is happening, it's okay to call enforcement, to call a bylaw, to call the police. Now, I'm not sure you necessarily want to get them involved in every time that somebody shows up now wearing the mask, but so it's going to be a bit of a judgment call. So really, enforcement to me, there's two sort of layers that I wanted to explore, and I think we've hit them. It's whether or not we can use these third parties to help us. And the other thing, though, the other question maybe for you, Denise, is to what extent do we want to facilitate them doing their jobs? Obviously, if there's a party in 306 and 305 is the one that sort of calls in bylaw, I mean, to what extent do we want to facilitate that? What's your take on it?
Well, the bottom line is, boards and management are looking after the residents' welfare. So, if it's a situation where you need to look after the residents, you need to take steps and to take steps under the enforcement provisions. So, it will be a judgment call. It will be a situation where you may have vulnerable residents, so that you have to take additional steps. Well, really, no one size fits all here.
Right. And one of the questions we had, and maybe then we'll move on, is whether or not you need to get to be shown a warrant before you let them transit through the common elements. And I'm not sure what's your view, Denise, on that, but I really don't think that you want to be obstructive in any way, shape, or form. That's how I would sort of approach it.
Yeah, we're dealing with a pandemic now, so the protocol that we followed before, and the case decisions we had, things are a bit different now. So we've got to keep in mind that we're looking after the safety and security of our residents. So what steps do you have to take? And you don't want to obstruct the police if you have reason to assist them. Then I think that's best to do in these circumstances.
Right. And we've spoken about this in the past in a different context, but it may be worth having a look at whether or not the corporation wants to have a policy in place where it is clear that they will facilitate, the work of, public safety and this, that, and the other. There may be something there. So at least everybody's sort of fair warned that I'm not suggesting you turn over your security cameras. I'm actually, that's a different webinar altogether, but I'm just suggesting that maybe if you have a policy in place that sort of gives some guidance as to how this corporation will facilitate and will assist in any way, shape, or form they can public security. Sean, I'm going to turn to you now. This work from home directive, does that affect at all how management is done?
It does on a few different levels. I mean, for us at Apollo, we have almost 100 employees, almost half of whom are on site, would be site staff. The balance are property managers or admin and accounting support. So in March, we shut down to bare bones of about 10 people in the office, gradually ramping up through the months. And with this new order, we're reverting right back to March. So effectively, anyone who can work from home must work from home. And we facilitate that where we can. A lot of property management cannot be done remotely. So obviously, we're considered essential and need to be on site as needed. But for whatever can be done remotely, it must be done.
Okay, wonderful. I think we're moving on to another very hot topic, and it has to do with reporting obligations. I know we're running out of time, so I got to keep it moving forward. But reporting obligation, I'm going to turn to you, David. Two things that almost sort of took place unnoticed. Last December 18th, the Ottawa Public Health issued a letter of instruction, and Toronto did the same on January 4th. And if I'm summarize it before I turn it to you, David, basically it's imposing on certain organizations an obligation to report when you have 2 positive cases within a short period of time. So to you now, David, what can you tell us about?
Sure. As you said, this is one of those things that came out and kind of went under the radar, and it was one of those instruction letters that came out, and no one really knew who it applied to and in what contexts and what industries. So we've now that we have one in Toronto, it got a little more fanfare, I think, than the Ottawa one that came out earlier in December, and it's the wording is a little confusing. It's in connection to the workplace, and it defines workers very broadly and workplace very broadly, as we see on the screen. Any land, premises, location, or thing at, upon, or in, or near where a worker works. So I know there's been some attempts by lawyers and by managers to reach out to the public health authorities to figure out, how does this affect condos? And I think our managers are lined up to kind of talk about how they've been viewing it and how they've been trying to comply, let's say, with those directions.
Okay, and so basically, if there are 2 known positive cases within 14 days in connection with the workplace, you have to report that to the public authority. I'm going to put the numbers on the screen, and you'll also be able, when this is uploaded, you'll be able to click on it and see the actual letter. But so I'm going to sort of divide this in 2. I'm going to first tackle it from the employer's perspective. I'm not sure, Jason, if you want to add anything to that. So from an employer's perspective, what does that kind of mean, or what does it bring to the forefront?
Well, it highlights a couple of different things. So number one is that you have to adjust now your outbreak response procedures. Those were the ones that we talked about back in later in March, where we talked about the condo corporation acting as a workplace, identifying what the condo corporation is responsible for doing when there is an outbreak within their building, who they have to notify, who they have to tell, what precautions do they need to do, what do they need to tell the other employees. That plan's already in place. All we're doing is tweaking it so that now, in the event there is 2 or more positive tests within 14 days within any connection of that, and you mentioned very eloquently that workplace includes the surrounding property outside the building, inside the building. So when you're doing your screening for the essential workers coming to your workplace, that's what you're doing. You're pre-screening them when they arrive, or you're screening them at the door, whether you're doing it digitally or you're having their service providers do it before even they report to work. That's the best way to do it. Remember we talked about that back in March, where we said, send your service providers a communication to ensure that they are doing this before they report to the building. That doesn't alleviate you from doing it at the entrance to the workplace, or or at your front door, but it gives you that added protection. And now they've set this in stone. So those response procedures need to be updated with that information to reflect the 2 or more positive tests within 14 days. So what does it mean for employers? Real quickly, it means to get back to basics, Rod. It means that we should be auditing our cleaning, number one, because we haven't done that in 9 months. Proactive organizations probably doing it every 30 days. Good for you. But a good chunk of organizations, we haven't done that. Number 2, I would also sit down with my employees and I would review how to wear a mask again. I would review how to wash your hands. I would review where they should be eating lunch and taking breaks. I would also review the requirement now for all employees to wear masks inside and outside on the property. Any area in relation to this workplace of a condo corporation. And I'd review that with each employee and I'd have them sign that document that says, I've reviewed the following with this date and time. And that does 2 things. 1, it solidifies your education with your employees. 2, they understand the importance of it. And 3, the condo corporation has strict documentation in the event that that's ever needed.
Right. Okay. And so this is very useful. And so I think what's very clear, though, is that these letters of direction apply to a workplace. They apply to whatever staff you may have on place, whatever employees, whatever contractors. So when it deals with employment, I think that's pretty clear that it applies and you have to deal with it. And I think one thing that we did mention in the past, and I think it's worth repeating here, is that if you're going to screen the contractors that come in and the employees that come in and so on, especially the contractors, I think it's important to also get from them an undertaking that if they, they go back home and they later develop symptoms or they later get tested and show to be positive, they got to bring this information back to you, because it's really no use if the information doesn't come back to you. At least that's how I'd approach it. Now let's turn this slightly and have a look at it from a different perspective. We dealt with employees. What about condo owners? Does that mean, and Denise, I'm going to turn to you now to lead this discussion. Do these letters of instructions are they triggered? Is the reporting obligation triggered if those reporting a positive case are owners as opposed to employees?
I don't think the intention was for this to apply, but I think, Rod, you brought this to my attention and I called Toronto Public Health. Of course, I really didn't get an answer. I guess the confirmation I got was that we can't tell you it doesn't apply to condominium corporations. So that means, well, perhaps it does apply. And, we are erring on the side of caution. So what is the harm in reporting if you know of 2 residents? Now that's if you know. And I guess we're going to talk about that soon, right? The disclosure obligations.
Right. Okay. And I got the same kind of answer from public health, which is a bit of a non-committal answer. But basically, I think what I was kind of getting was, well, listen, if you hadn't asked, the answer would be if there's 2 cases that are unrelated, totally unrelated, have nothing to do. These people never left their unit, or there was no employee to deal with or to talk to, and you have 2 unrelated cases. Maybe it doesn't trigger this obligation. But I also agree with you, Denise, that there's really no harm in reporting.
Right, but how do you know if these 2 are unrelated? So, one lives on floor 1 and one lives on the 10th floor. How do you know? Maybe they did get together. So
right, or maybe they did speak to the super, or maybe they did speak to the concierge. That's the issue. So then, how do we get that information, Denise? Can we go and demand it from owners? Can we impose that reporting obligation?
I think, the approach has been, and I think, management or, our panel here will speak to that. What we've done is since March, corporations are sending out notices to residents, advising them if they do have an outbreak to report it. And reporting it in a positive manner so that it serves to benefit that owner, so that management can assist them in taking out their garbage, or so getting people to come forward because they know that it will assist them if they provide that information, and also confirming that that information is private and it will only be disclosed to staff that are required to assist that resident. But other than that, the other residents won't know that they have COVID.
Right. And somebody in the chat is actually sort of reminding me that, and I'm not sure if I can name them, but a very famous person actually in the management industry who is got a sense from public health in Toronto that in fact if they are unrelated to the workplace, if these two cases are not related to the workplace, you don't have to report them. And that's kind of sort of the sense I also got. But the difficulty, as Denise sort of pointed out, is how do we know if they're in relation to the workplace? If they spoke to or interacted with the concierge or with the security or with the, the whatever staff you have on place. So let's turn to the managers, and I'm going to turn to you, Catherine, first. How do we get cooperation from the owners on that front? Like, what's the message you're sending out, if any?
It's certainly, you get more flies with sugar than you do with vinegar approach, right? And Sean and Jose, I think will agree with me in saying that what you're looking to do is facilitate their effective self-isolation during this period. And we certainly don't want anybody to be vilified in the community or for there to be excess concern. We want everybody to be able to be at home and safe. And for the folks who consider this to be their workplace, they can also ensure that they are safe. So when we do have a positive case, as Jason said previously, it's a restatement, a reiteration of all of the precautions that should already be taken on a daily basis. And in communities where you aren't fortunate enough to have enough staff to facilitate some of the garbage collection and things like that, we had spoken far earlier in the pandemic about some volunteer type groups and use of waivers in order to facilitate that. And for things as simple as going to get groceries, it's going to get challenging again the way it was before.
Okay, and so I'm being told by my magicians that we're running out of time. So this is where we're going to start speaking really quickly because we need to cover everything. So Jose, I'm going to turn to you, and I guess my question to you on this topic before we close it off is, what do we do with this information once we do get an information? So an owner, other than reporting it to public health, owners turn to you and say, yeah, I've tested positive, and so on and so forth. What do you do with this?
Well, you thank them for communicating with you because clearly they don't have to. They're doing it on a voluntary basis. You find out from them what they need. You give them guidance, of course. Remind them that they may not leave the unit. They shouldn't be traveling to the laundry room. They shouldn't be traveling to the garbage room. Set up a system in place within your community with the resources that you have available, either staff or volunteers, and make sure that they receive the support that they need so that they can remain at home, be comfortable, and be well. Personally, I check in on them by email, just simply because I'm a den mother. I just want to make sure that everything's going well. But keep an eye on your staff as well, and keep touch with the person or either staff or volunteer who are helping this person, and make sure that you're kind of gauging and monitoring what's going on there as well, so that you're aware if there's some kind of contamination that occurs. At the end of it all, we of course document everything to file and due diligence. But other than that, I think it's going to happen. It's not it's not whether or not it's going to happen. It is going to happen in most of our communities.
For sure. Okay, so I'm going to turn to one of the two twins for a flash question. So what information do we provide the rest of the community when we know of 2 units that have been infected, let's say? Who's going to take that on? Twin number 1? Twin number 2?
I mean, I can. Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
Go ahead.
So the question being, what goes to all of the other owners?
Right. Can we tell them that Catherine in Unit 306 has been infected and that she has a habit of licking elevator buttons?
There's a whole lot. That's a loaded question, I think. There's a whole lot to unpack there. But at the very least, I would say no. We don't want to tell any names or give any identifying information. In fairness to the person who is COVID positive, we want to make sure that their information is protected. The next set of questions becomes, okay, so do we want to narrow it down at all? Do we want to say what floor it's on? Do we want to say, what wing of the building it's on? I don't think there is a yes, no clear answer to that question. I think it's something that can be decided based on the how your building is set up, or if you're in if you're not even in a high-rise building, which admittedly we have been talking a lot about, but as we know, some condominiums are just a series of townhomes. So I think you can, as a board and probably in conjunction with your lawyer, talk about what level of identifying information with respect to, you know, this area of the building, perhaps. But certainly you don't want to fingerprint this person.
Right. Okay, we're out of time. We need to go on to the main topic, today's topic, and it deals with vaccination. And there's going to be 3 questions that we're going to tackle right now. Question 1, can condos require vaccination? Question number 2, can vaccinated owners demand access to the amenities? That's going to come. This question is about to come. And should condo corporations get involved into immunization campaigns? Now, those are the topics we're going to try to tackle. But before I get started, I have to say this. I have to say that I think to some extent this discussion is a bit premature, and it's premature for a couple of reasons. But although it's premature, I wanted to be the first one to have it because the question has been asked since last mid-December, I guess. And so it's a bit premature because vaccines are not readily available right now. So it's not a question that you're going to face anytime soon. I think there's about 1.003% of the Ontario population that has been vaccinated. So at this rate, it's going to take us 6 years to vaccinate everybody. And we've used already about 78% of our doses. So more are coming. Don't panic, people at home. So that's the first reason why it's a bit premature. Also, what's not clear yet is whether it is a one-shot deal or whether this is going to be, we don't know how long the immunization sort of protection lasts. So is this going to be a yearly thing? That too is an important maybe consideration in the debate. And most importantly, we don't know yet how public health or public authorities or how the province or how the federal level will deal with this vaccine and whether or not they'll make it mandatory. We do know at this stage, for instance, that only 3 provinces mandate vaccines, not this vaccine, but kids, you know, like for various sort of illnesses that usually affect the young ones. Only 3 provinces mandate it: Ontario, New Brunswick, and to a lesser extent, Manitoba. And that's only required if you're going to send your kids to public school. And there's all sorts of exceptions. So I think the discussion is a bit premature in that sense. But now that I took all of the wind out of Denise's sails, Denise,
Well,
how
I was
do
going to
we?
answer all 3 questions in a very short way. I was going to say
Do
no,
it.
no, and maybe.
Okay, so no,
No,
we
can
cannot.
you impose, vaccinations?
Right, I agree. And
And you know, and you've said it all, really, until it's mandated by the government, you have reasons why people can't get vaccinated, religious reason, human rights issues. So how can you force it? And then think about it. If you did enforce it, I would love to hear from managers. How are you going to keep track of who's been vaccinated? And at what period? You wait the 2-week period? It's just not possible. Not at this point.
right. And
Well,
so the second question being, can a vaccinated owner demand access to the amenities?
Well, I think it's important that you discussed it this week because we're starting to get those questions. So I think we need to be prepared for the questions and know how to answer it. And my position is no, that you really have to wait until it's safe to open up all the amenities. Once it is, then you can deal with the protocols, someone's had a vaccination, but you really need to wait. And I think I would hope everybody else on the panel agrees with this. Let's just keep the amenities closed until we know that it's safe to do so.
Right, so safe for everybody and don't leave anybody behind kind of thing. And
That's
Jose,
right.
yesterday you raised a good point about opening facilities for vaccinated people. You had a good point. Do you recall it?
Yes.
No. Go
No.
ahead.
Yes, my point was no. I'm a strong opponent of that idea. I really honestly believe that condominium corporations should be staying in their lane. It is not the condominium corporation's mandate to offer medical services or to open its facilities to medical service
Oh,
providers.
you're on the next topic. Sorry,
Oh,
park that.
that's
Park
what you
that.
said.
Yeah, park that. No. So yesterday you
Oh.
raised a good point, which is the fact that you're vaccinated doesn't mean that you cannot carry the virus and infect other people. So the
There
fact
you
you're vaccinated doesn't really give you a green pass to be able to go in the gym. I think that's how I understood your point
I
yesterday.
made 2 excellent points yesterday, and that was the the other one. But yes, from everything I've read so far, there is no evidence, and certainly the medical community cannot confirm that having been vaccinated, even with the second dose, is going to prevent you from being a carrier and infecting others. So having been vaccinated, you may not have symptoms, you may not know that you have it, but attending a facility or being in contact with others will put them at risk. So for that very reason, I don't think you can open to certain people and not to others. And I would also very much be concerned with creating a subclass of people in a building. You're going to create some discrimination, who has been and who hasn't, the ins and outs and all that kind of stuff. You don't want to go there. The
Right.
facilities are open
Right.
for everyone or closed for everyone.
Right. And back to the first question that we sort of answered quickly, can we impose vaccination? I guess there's going to be all sorts of logistical problem behind whether or not somebody was vaccinated. And then, you know, how are you going to keep track of that? And we're not in the business of keeping that kind of medical information. And are you going to have to keep track of who got a first dose and who got the second dose and who is on the Pfizer category and who's on the Moderna one? There's all sorts of issues with respect to that. But something we did sort of jump over is, so we dealt with, I guess the consensus is you can't demand vaccination from the owners. And by the way, this may very well change. Don't hold us to it. Like, who knows, in 5 or 6 or 9 or 10 months, we may actually have more information, and it may sort of enlighten our knowledge. But something we sort of very briefly sort of jumped over is, what about, can we demand vaccination from our staff? Can we demand vaccination for our contractors? And again, it's a bit premature because there's only 1% of Ontarians that have been vaccinated. But this is a bit maybe different when you're dealing with contractors and staff. And I can say this is that there are some cases already that provide some guidance, some limited guidance, and these cases all dealt with the flu season and the flu vaccine. And most of these cases were in a hospital setting or long-term care facility setting where the management wanted their nurses, their staff to be vaccinated, and they were provided, in all cases, they were providing employees with the option that you either vaccinate or you wear a mask for the duration of the flu season. And it's been contested on a couple of occasions, and the case lies a bit all over. Some cases came back where they said, well, as long as it's supported by evidence and as long as you're providing with your staff with options, mask or vaccinate, some provinces have upheld them. Other provinces have not upheld them and have concluded that, listen, as long as it is not mandated, you probably cannot impose that. So unfortunately, we don't have a clear answer yet. I do think that time will tell. You want to make sure that your corporation is not the name of the case, but we'll find out more as things evolve. And I think it'll be different. This case will be different from how the flu situation has been addressed, in the sense that the efficacy of the current vaccines so far appears to be far exceeds the efficacy we have of the yearly flu shot. Anyways, more to come, but I think if you can demonstrate that it's a bona fide requirement for the employment, that's the starting point of the discussion to whether or not you should be able to demand that your staff be vaccinated. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything, Denise or the twins, anything to add to that? No, I'll take it.
No, I don't.
We want to talk about immunization on,
Yes, that's
on
the
the common
one.
elements.
Right. So that's the last question that we wanted to tackle, which is, should corporations get involved in immunization campaigns? Should they set up a shot clinic in the amenity room and so on and so forth? And folks, you'll hear tonight that there's two schools of thoughts on this. You will hear from the stay in your laners, and you will hear from the check your blind spotters, who think that maybe there's a way to move forward. So let's go ahead with Denise. Do you want to take the first kick at it?
Well, normally I'd say stay in your lane, but on this one, I've been convinced otherwise. And that's because I've been dealing with a lot of attorneys in the US, in particular, the state of Florida, where they have huge homeowner associations. And the only way that they're going to get to the residents to get them, get the vaccination is by doing it in large groups and facilitating that kind of program. I don't see an issue with it. Of course, the first thing you want to do is call your insurer. You want to make sure that you're insured, and then find out from whoever's providing it whether they require anything from the condominium corporation, usually an indemnity and a release. And that's okay if you then in turn get that from the resident who is vaccinated. They will sign the release. Look, we are here to try to help our communities. And I'm saying we're not in the business of being a healthcare provider, but there's nothing wrong with facilitating.
Right. Catherine, you had some experience in the past. Now, mind you, we were dealing with the flu shots, but what can you share with us?
It was something that the board and the community were really quite adamant about doing and facilitating. And they engaged with a private health company who administered all of the vaccinations and, of course, took in all of the forms that were required. And it certainly wasn't mandatory or compulsory. But it was something that was probably the single most well-received COVID-related item that corporation has undertaken. And they are on record as being first online if and when they are able to host such a vaccination clinic for their residents for the COVID vaccine. It is something that we have been, there have been lots of inquiries about it. And I don't know that I think it's any different from corporations that have hosted blood donor clinics or, polling stations for elections. It's more of a facility of a convenience than it is providing the medical services.
Okay, so that's from you guys heard now from the Check Your Blind Spotters. Toronto is coming across as the friendlier, softer, kinder, loving community that it is, and so for once, I think the party poopers are going to come from Ottawa. We're going to be the stay in your laners.
Attitudes match the weather.
That's right. There's a huge problem. I have a lot of concerns with this, and many of them, Denise. In fairness to you, I mean, you've identified them. There's all sorts of liability attached to that. What if something goes wrong? What if there's a medical emergency? What if somebody reacts to the vaccine? How can we ensure that it's the right vaccine that's provided? How can we ensure that these vaccines were stored properly and they weren't tampered with? How do we deal with the traffic to and from the party room for the shots? To me, there's all sorts of challenges that I really don't see a huge benefit. I would be far more sort of inclined to tell people, listen, go to the pharmacy. You want the vaccine, go to the pharmacy. I do think, very respectfully, I do see a big difference between that and polling stations. The whole concept of this pandemic is how it spreads. And so I think the last thing I want to do is have anything to do with, bringing people to and from a certain location. That's sort of my take. I think if somebody was to ask for my opinion on it, I'd probably say that's not our business. We're not that business. Don't get involved. There's going to be shots are going to be available at all pharmacies and so on and so forth. In fact, today there's a regulation that came out authorizing nurses and pharmacists to give the shots. So I think it's going to be rolled out to the pharmacy level. But I kind of see also like how we would want to help people, and so I understand sort of the push for that. Sean, Jose, anything to add from the manager's perspective?
I think I lean towards your line of thinking as well, except to the extent that our Christmas wish, or my Christmas wish to a lot of people was, I hope that next year we're not talking about this at the same time in December 2021. And we will be, in fact. And the only way we won't be is if enough people get vaccinated. So I think if it came down to it, that there was a shortage of space to vaccinate or to get people vaccinated, or the government requested or required, or Ottawa Public Health required assistance, I think there'd be an argument for doing it, but it's not something that I would look at seeking out and trying to push the envelope on. There's a process in place, a prioritization in place, and if we fit within that, great. If we don't, then we'll get there when we get there.
Right, Jose.
And I jumped the gun on this one before, but you've heard it already. I'm very much a stay in your lane person on this topic. I really think there are tons of great facilities out there who are going to be able to do this and roll it out much more effectively and efficiently than a condominium corporation can. I think the stress that it's going to put on the staff and on the community, on the people who are working there is going to be significant. I think that you're going to jeopardize the privacy for a lot of people as they see each other coming in and out. They're going to know who is vaccinated, who is not. Who I didn't see. You're going to have someone waiting to see who's walking in and out. Never a good idea. And in a world where the insurance companies are looking for a reason to not renew your policies and cancel your policies, I think if you start calling in with these kinds of odd requests where you're stepping out of your lane, trying to do that kind of stuff, you're just giving them fodder for a reason to cancel or not renew.
I think what's important to take from this discussion we just had, the fact that you've heard pro first and the party poopers afterwards, it doesn't mean that one is right or wrong. And you shouldn't sort of, it wasn't a popularity debate that we had tonight by having this discussion. I think it shows the complexity of the situation and the difficult decisions that everybody has to face. And so I think that's what I'd like people to leave with, not so much, well, I guess also pick the lawyer that has the view that's closer to your views. I guess if you put 5 lawyers in a room, you'll have 12 different opinions. But I really want this to be, as I said, not a popularity contest and who's right, who's wrong. There's really 2 sides to this medal, and I think that's what we should sort of walk away with. At least that's my perspective. Okay, folks, we're at the end. It's 6:01, and I want to go around to thank everybody as we usually do. And so we will do this. You really have literally 10 seconds each. I'm going to start with you, Sean. Thank you so much for participating again. Any words of wisdom before we go?
No, like I said, hopefully I was a little more rested last week, so a little off my game tonight, but great to be back. I need to hurry up and get home before the curfew starts in my neighborhood. So
That's
I'm
right.
on my way.
Perfect. Jose from DES Services, thank you so much again for joining us tonight. Any sort of parting words?
Oh, I agree with Sean. For reasons unknown, this week is absolutely insane. Just everyone take a breath, slow down. It'll be okay. We'll get through this. We've done it before. Keep your sense of humor.
Right. And Jose's home already, so that's perfect. Catherine Gow from Crossbridge. She's been here from the beginning, speaking on behalf of ACMO. Catherine, any parting words?
Hey, think the best of the other guy and consider very carefully how you're going to set up your expectations for each other. We'll get through it. We did before. We can again.
One of my favorite condo lawyers, but certainly my favorite blogger, Denise Lash from Lash Condo Law. Denise, any parting words?
I was going to say this was a great topic tonight because I think that all boards and managers are going to get these questions. So now you have the answers. Well, at least you know how to respond.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Denise, for being with us tonight. Jason Reed from the National Life Safety Group. Jason, we put your topic at the beginning, so we didn't run out of time. Thanks so much for being here every week. Any words of wisdom before we go? I think he's muted. Yes, the second muter.
Sorry, we developed some plans, whether they're 1-page or 2-page last March, but it's time to, reinvigorate them and go back to the basics. I can't stress that enough. The number one cause for workplace transmission is typically found in the break rooms where staff are having lunches and they're mingling at that point. So that's a big fact that you can take back to your teams because we do a really good job of protecting them. But when they're off on break, we've got to make sure that they're aware of their obligations as well.
Okay, twin number 1. Words of wisdom, David?
Yeah, great to be back as well. I missed out on the last one. Recuperating, getting back to normal. So my parting words is similar to Jason's thought. We're now in a new year and all of these new restrictions are coming our way that affect different people and different populations in different ways. Take the opportunity to review your policies internally and to really think about how you could augment and make sure all your bases are covered for the coming year.
Okay, and twin number 2, in no particular order. Graham, any parting words before we go?
Thanks for the clarifier there. Yeah, I think my word of wisdom is just going to be, in light of the stay-at-home order, we're going to have a lot more people at the same time all staying in their units. That might lead to some friction, some noise, some issues like that. Try to be patient with one another. Try to work with people to address these problems, and where at all possible, try to avoid World War III. Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody. And so next webinar is going to be Wednesday, February 3rd. There's something we really want to encourage all of you to do. The government is consulting on the future of electronic voting and of virtual meetings. And so I know, Denise, you have blogged about that and you've put the link, and we've done it as well. So look for your favorite blogger and find the link to provide your views to the government on electronic voting, virtual meetings. What am I forgetting, Denise?
Board meetings.
Right.
So, yeah.
notices. So
Right.
being able to circulate notices without the consent form that the government
Right.
had used previously.
So basically the question is, are we dragging the condo land industry into this century, or do you want it to go back to the Flintstone ages when the emergency is over? Can we make more permanent the changes that were made? And I think there's good reasons to do so, but there's also, I think, share your views or concerns so they do develop regulations that sort of confine or give some guidance so we don't turn into it doesn't turn into the Far West again. Anyways, so here we are, folks. It's the end of this webinar. Next month, February 3rd at the same time, although I think I'm going to poll people about whether or not this is a good time to meet. You'll need to register again. You'll be able to register by going to Condo Advisor, clicking on the webinar tab, and it will bring you to the registration form. You'll also be able to see past webinars by accessing it through the webinar tab. So that's it, folks. Can't thank you enough for having spared the time to join us tonight. Wishing you all the best. Wear a mask, wash your hands, be friendly with the neighbors, but not too friendly. Talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.
Okay, bye.